his side.
Is there any evidence that he had any sense of divine mission?
Divine mission.
That he had any sense of divine mission?
He talked about providence a lot, didn't he? His religion, Lincoln's religion, is a really interesting question, and it's something that's still debated and written about today. When I was getting at his desire for fame a little bit earlier, part of the perception is that early in his life, he wasn't religious, maybe not even that spiritual, and he believed that when he died, that was it. And so the only way he could be immortal was if he did something that would make him remember today, that would make him immortal. Whether or not he felt like he had divine providence or divine mission, I don't know. I haven't seen that. He did talk about providence all the time. But he was famously circumspect on this, wasn't he? His religion. And even at times talked about, I think it was Lincoln, he was saying, well, God's maybe on our side, but the South thinks he's on their side too. So, what does that mean? Yeah, it's a great question. I would refer you to Alan Galzo, who I think you met when we had him in, but he has written great books on Lincoln and his religion, and he would be a better person to answer that question than me. We'll have to invite him back to Grand Rapids soon and ask him.
I'd like to ask you, Brian, by the way, great presentation. Thank you for enlightening us so much. My question...
Of course, you couldn't say anything different.
What is the lesson for teachers to go into the classroom, and if they have one message about Lincoln that they should convey, what do you think that message should be?
That's a good one, because I just gave you probably 9 messages, and we've got to boil it down. I think one that I think every college student should hear, and I wish I had heard when I started as a freshman, is that you have to take control of your own development, of your own education. Of course, you're going to meet mentors, you're going to have great teachers, they're going to expose you to a lot, but if you're only getting what they give you in the classroom, and you're only getting the assigned readings, you're not going to go very far. This is kind of a difficult one to talk about as someone who works at a university, but we talk so much about liberal arts education, and it is hugely important. But if all you're getting is what you get in the classroom, you're spread so widely, you're going to get such a narrow or superficial understanding of so many subjects. And so I would tell college students looking at Lincoln's life, or I guess elementary or middle school students for that matter, to take your education in your own hands, take the reins, pursue these subjects further outside the classroom. Because we don't have enough time, we don't have enough seat time in schools anyway. I guess that's what I would say.
This is a question about Lincoln's Jewish style. And I don't know if it's off topic or not, but maybe I can make it on topic. Doris Prince Goodwin wrote about the Fatima Chronicles. And I don't know enough about Lincoln to know if that's accurate. I assume she's accurate. She's an historian. But given that, and given what you know about Lincoln's boyhood and his rise, why do you think he would do such a thing? I mean, do you think it would be for the accepted reason, which is that he wanted to get a lot of information and then kind of put it together, synthesize it, and come out with a good outcome? Or here's the basis of my question. It seems as though he was a strong and determined leader who may have been more predisposed to toward an imperial presidency.
An imperial presidency?
Yeah, as opposed to a presidency.
Right. Well, there are really 2 questions there then. So it's about why did he bring so many strong individuals into his cabinet with the kind of background he had, and the second was, something. Was he prone to the imperial presidency, the imperial interpretation? I would say for that first question, I would take, one answer is I would take Lincoln at his word. The presidency was a much different thing in 1861 to 1865 than it is today. And cabinet officers did a lot of the governing. And the president didn't have nearly as much support in his office as he does today. Lincoln had 2 assistants, I think. And so it was legitimately important that you had the highest quality individuals you could in those positions. And so I would take Lincoln at his word that he genuinely wanted the strongest people possible there. I would also say that Lincoln's rise gave him a heck of a lot of confidence. Here's a boy from the backwoods of Indiana, the backwoods of Kentucky, who got to the point where he was making $170,000 for a case, for one case, not 170 at the time, but the equivalent of 170. Here's a man who had college graduates in his cabinet, graduates from Dartmouth, from Transylvania, from some of the top colleges and universities in the country at the time. But he trusted his intellect, and he trusted his education, even though he didn't have very much formal education, enough to believe he was stronger than these individuals, I think. So he wanted the strongest possible there, but he certainly wasn't intimidated by them. There's the story of Lincoln in Springfield when he was president-elect. And I think it was Chase who was supposed to have visited him there. Several people did. But the story is Chase coming out, and one of Lincoln's friends approached him and said, "Why is Chase here? Why would you want Chase in your cabinet? He thinks he's a bigger man than you." And Lincoln said, "Do you know anyone else who thinks they're a bigger man than me?" I said, "Well, I don't think I do. But why? Why do you ask?" "Well, because I want them in my cabinet too." And so he legitimately was looking for strong people in his cabinet, I think. And he wasn't intimidated by them. He still felt like he would be the best. And others, you know, you hear from Seward in particular and others at Stanton that had a very low opinion of Abraham Lincoln going into the White House. And Stanton had even slighted him on several occasions. They'd come across each other as lawyers. But after months, after experiencing the White House, their opinions totally changed because he had this exterior that was very disarming. He was ugly. He did sometimes tell these really earthy country bumpkin stories. But in important moments, they saw his intellect and they saw what he was capable of. So I think that's my answer for your first question. The second question about the Imperial presidency, I would point you toward David Herbert Donald, who died just this year, but was one of the great Lincoln scholars, has what's considered the best biography out there. But he wrote this short book of essays, and one of them he actually talks about Lincoln as a Whig president. And the Whig philosophy of the presidency was actually much more centered on Congress. The presidency gave up powers in the Whig idea to Congress and to the cabinet. And so if anything, his background leading into the presidency would have been to leave a lot more work to the cabinet, leave a lot more work to the Congress, and only step in when necessary. And I think he would argue that war changed things, that crisis changed things. You look like you wanted to have a follow-up.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that the suspension of
David's court.
Yeah.
And in fact, I have a book review up here that I wrote that you could read about Daniel Farber's book on this subject. And really what Farber argues is that Lincoln definitely went beyond presidential powers, ordinary presidential powers. But that Lincoln would have argued, well, these aren't ordinary times. And in fact, he went to Congress. He was a little opportunistic and delayed the special session of Congress long enough to do certain things. But he went to Congress and said, "I believe everything I did was within presidential or congressional authority. And I expect that you will likely sign off on these things," and they did. And later there were Supreme Court cases or a number of things that went into sort of justifying what he did. But yeah, no, he's certainly open to an attack for being the first imperial president. I would argue in extraordinary times it was going to happen.